My own son looked me dead in the eye and told the paramedics I was senile just minutes after I fell down a flight of stairs that I've walked for 40 years. He held my hand, shedding crocodile tears, while his wife kicked a loose screw under the rug. They think I didn't see it. They think I'm just a helpless old lady ready to die and leave them my fortune. But they forgot one thing. I raised the shark that's trying to eat me, and I know exactly how to bite back. If you want to see how this betrayal unfolds, smash that subscribe button to Cheating Verse and comment Teen Grandma below. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room were giving me a migraine that felt like a jackhammer behind my eyes, or maybe that was the concussion. I shifted on the paper-thin mattress, wincing as a sharp pain shot up my left hip. The doctor, a young guy who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, was typing away on a tablet while my son, Brad, stood over him, talking in that low, concerned voice he perfected during his days as a corporate lawyer. "She's been confused lately, Doc," Brad was saying, shaking his head. "Dizzy spells, forgetting where she is. We've been telling her to move to a jagged care facility for months, but she's stubborn. I think she just missed a step." "I didn't miss a damn step," I croaked out. My throat felt like sandpaper. "The carpet slipped. It wasn't tacked down." Brad turned to me, his face a mask of pity that made my stomach turn. "Mom, please, don't get agitated. The carpet is fine. Cheryl checks it every week when she cleans. You probably just got lightheaded again. Remember what happened at the grocery store last month?" I narrowed my eyes at him. The grocery store incident was another time I suddenly felt woozy after drinking a protein shake Cheryl had insisted I take for energy. But arguing with him now in front of the doctor who was already looking at me with that patronizing "poor dear" expression was a losing battle. "Mrs. Stone," the doctor said, finally looking up, "your son is right to be worried. You're lucky nothing is broken, just severe bruising and a mild concussion. But at 72, falls are serious. We're going to discharge you, but you need 24-hour observation." "She'll come stay with us," Brad said quickly, too quickly. "No," I said, sitting up. The room spun, but I gritted my teeth. "I'm going home. To my house. My husband built that place, and I'm not leaving it." Brad sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, but he looked ragged, desperate. I knew his real estate investments were tanking. News travels fast in a small town like Oak Creek, mostly thanks to the gossip at the hair salon. But I didn't realize how bad it was until he started pushing me to sell the estate 6 months ago. "Fine, Mom," Brad said, his jaw tight. "But Cheryl and I are staying with you. I'm not leaving you alone in that death trap of a house." The ride home was silent. I stared out the window of Brad's Lexus, watching the familiar Connecticut suburbs roll by. My house, the manor, as the locals called it, sat on 5 acres of prime land. My late husband, Frank, had poured his soul into that place. It was my sanctuary. Now, with Brad and his wife Cheryl moving in like vultures circling a carcass, it felt like a prison. When we pulled into the driveway, Cheryl was already on the porch. She was a petite woman with a smile that never quite reached her eyes, always dressed in yoga pants like she was ready to sprint away from her responsibilities. "Oh, Maggie," she squealed, rushing down the steps to help me out of the car. Her grip on my arm was a little too tight. "I'm so worried when Brad called. I've already set up the guest room downstairs so you don't have to deal with the stairs." "The stairs that you said were fine?" I muttered, pulling my arm away. "Oh, honey, the carpet is perfectly secure. I checked it myself right after the ambulance left. You probably just got lightheaded again." They walked me inside, flanking me like prison guards. The house smelled of lemon polish and something else, something bitter, like burnt plastic. I limped to the living room and sank into my favorite armchair. Above the fireplace hung a portrait of Frank. I wished he were here. He'd have thrown Brad through a window for talking to me the way he did. "I made you some tea," Cheryl said, reappearing instantly with a steaming mug. "Chamomile. It'll help you relax." I looked at the cup. "I'm not thirsty." "Drink it, Mom," Brad said, his voice dropping an octave. He was standing by the window, looking out at the sprawling lawn. "You need to hydrate. Doctor's orders." I took the mug, pretending to sip, but let the liquid barely touch my lips. It tasted metallic. I set it down on the coaster. "I'm tired. I'm going to rest." "Good idea," Cheryl said. "I put the baby monitor in your room so we can hear you if you need anything." A baby monitor. I was 72, not 2, but I didn't have the energy to fight. I let them settle me into the guest room, listening to them whisper in the hallway after they closed the door. "Can't keep doing this, Brad," Cheryl's voice hissed through the wood. "She's resilient. The fall should have—" "Shut up," Brad snapped. "Keep your voice down. We just need her to sign the power of attorney papers next week. Once we have control of the assets, we can move her to that facility in Vermont, the cheap one." My heart hammered against my ribs. My suspicions weren't just paranoia. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were actively trying to accelerate the process or declare me incompetent. I looked around the room, feeling trapped. My cell phone was in my purse, which they had helpfully left in the kitchen. I closed my eyes, trying to formulate a plan, when a loud roar shattered the evening silence. It was the distinct, aggressive rumble of a heavy motorcycle engine. It grew louder and louder until it cut off right in front of the house. I heard the front door slam open. "What the hell?" Brad's voice boomed from the hallway. "Who do you think you are? Get off my property." "It's Grandma's property, not yours, you suit-wearing leech," a rough, familiar voice shot back. My heart skipped a beat. Jax! My grandson, Brad's estranged son. I hadn't seen Jackson in 5 years, not since Brad kicked him out for refusing to go to law school and choosing to be a mechanic instead. Jax was the black sheep, the wild card, the one person Brad couldn't control. I forced my aching body up and stumbled to the door, opening it just as the shouting match in the foyer turned physical. Brad was shoving a tall, broad-shouldered man in a leather jacket. Jax looked different, older, with a scruffy beard and grease stains on his jeans, but he had Frank's eyes. "Get out," Brad screamed, his face red. "Call him," Jax said calmly, brushing Brad's hands off his chest like they were flies. I saw the ambulance leave the hospital. One of my buddies is an EMT. He told me Grandma took a spill, said it looked sketchy. "It was an accident," Cheryl shrieked, clutching her pearls. "She's confused. She doesn't need you upsetting her." "Jax?" I called out, leaning against the doorframe for support. Jax's head snapped toward me. His hard expression softened instantly. He pushed past his father and crossed the room in 3 long strides. "Hey, Grams, you look like you went 12 rounds with a semi-truck." "I feel like it too," I managed a weak smile. "She needs rest, Jackson," Brad spat, stepping forward. "She doesn't need her delinquent grandson sniffing around for handouts. We have this under control." Jax ignored him, looking at the bruising on my arm. "Under control?" he asked. "Is that why she looks like this? Is that why the grapevine says you're drowning in debt, Dad? Desperate men do desperate things." "You have 5 seconds to leave," Brad threatened, pulling out his phone. "I invited him," I lied, finding a sudden reserve of strength. "Jax stays." "Mom, you're not thinking clearly," Brad groaned. "He's dangerous." "The only dangerous thing in this house is the slippery carpet." I stared pointedly at Cheryl. "Jax stays. There are plenty of rooms. If you kick him out, you can leave too." Brad glared at Jax, hatred radiating off him in laves, but he knew he couldn't physically force Jax out without a scene, and Brad hated scenes. "Fine, but if he touches anything, if he steals 1 piece of silver, he's gone." "I'm not here for your silver, Dad," Jax said coldly. "I'm here because Grandma's the only person in this family who isn't a snake." Jax helped me back to the bed, his grip firm and steady, unlike Cheryl's claw-like hold. He sat on the edge of the mattress while Brad and Cheryl retreated to the kitchen, probably to strategize. "Are you okay, really?" Jax asked, his voice low. "No," I whispered, leaning in close. "Jax, I didn't trip. The carpet moved, and the tea, it tastes wrong. They're trying to make me think I'm crazy." Jack's jaw tightened, a muscle feathering in his cheek. He didn't dismiss me. He didn't look at me like I was senile. He looked at me like he believed me. "I got you, Grams," he whispered back. "I'm not going anywhere. Tonight, I'm sleeping on the couch right outside your door. Nobody comes in or out without getting through me." He stood up and walked to the window, peering out at the darkening estate. "Tomorrow morning, I'm going to take a look at those stairs myself, and I'm going to check your car and the furnace and everything else Dad has touched. If they're playing games, we're going to burn their playground down." I watched him, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in months. The wolf was at the door, but the watchdog had finally come home. But I knew Brad. He was smart, calculated, and now he was cornered. Having Jax here might save me, or it might just get us both killed. "Get some sleep," Jack said, turning off the lamp. As I drifted off, fighting the dizziness, I heard Jax walk out into the hallway. I heard the distinct sound of him dragging a heavy armchair in front of my door, blocking it. For the first time in weeks, I closed my eyes without fearing I wouldn't wake up. But the battle was just starting. The morning sun hit the heavy velvet curtains of the guest room, but it didn't bring any warmth. I woke up with a stiff neck and a throbbing headache that felt like a hangover, despite not having a drop of alcohol in years. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the armchair shoved against the door and the heavy boots sticking out from the blankets on the sofa. Jax. He was already awake, sitting up with a mug of steaming coffee in his hands, staring at the door like he was waiting for a SWAT team to burst through. "Morning, Grams," he said, his voice gravelly. "Sleep okay?" "As well as can be expected when you're sleeping in a house with vipers," I grunted, swinging my legs off the bed. My hips screamed in protest, but I forced myself to stand. "Is the coast clear?" "Brad and Cheryl are in the kitchen. I can hear them arguing about organic eggs." Jack smirked, but his eyes were serious. He stood up and walked over to me, pulling a small plastic baggie out of his pocket. Inside were 3 bent metal staples. I checked the stairs while everyone was asleep. These are the carpet tacks from the top step. Look at the bend, Grams. They weren't pulled out by wear and tear. Someone took a pair of pliers and yanked them up just enough so the carpet would slide when you put weight on it. This was a booby trap. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the drafty old house. Hearing it was one thing. Seeing the twisted metal was another. My son didn't just neglect the house. He engineered my fall. He wanted me to break my neck. "Put those away," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and cold rage. "If they know we know, they'll panic, and panicked people are dangerous." "I got a plan," Jack said, pocketing the evidence. "But you gotta trust me. We need to play dumb for a little bit. Let them think you're still woozy, still confused. If they think their plan is working, they'll get sloppy." I nodded. "I can play the senile old bat. I've been practicing for years to get out of jury duty." Jax chuckled, the sound brief and dry. "Let's go get some breakfast. I'm starving, and I don't trust Cheryl not to poison the oatmeal." We walked into the kitchen together. The atmosphere was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Cheryl was at the stove flipping pancakes with aggressive enthusiasm, while Brad sat at the island furiously typing on his phone. When we entered, Brad flipped his phone face down instantly. "Good morning, Maggie," Cheryl chirped, her voice pitching up 2 octaves. "I made blueberry pancakes, your favorite, and I have your morning meds ready." She pointed to a small porcelain dish on the counter containing 4 pills, 2 white, 1 yellow, and a large blue capsule I didn't recognize. "Since when do I take a blue capsule?" I asked, leaning heavily on the counter. "I'd take blood pressure meds and a multivitamin." "Dr. Evans called it in this morning," Brad said smoothly, not meeting my eyes. "It's for the dizziness, to help with the concussion symptoms. He sent it over to the pharmacy first thing." I reached for the pill, but Jax's hand shot out and covered the dish. "Hold on," Jax said, picking up the blue pill and holding it up to the light. "This looks like the sedative, Dad. You don't give sedatives to someone with a concussion. You want to suppress her brain function when she's trying to heal?" Brad's face flushed a dark, ugly red. "I'm following the doctor's orders, Jackson. I'm a mechanic, not a pharmacist. Give her the medication." "Let me see the bottle," Jax challenged, his hand open. "I threw it away," Cheryl interjected quickly. "I put them in the weekly organizer." "Bull," Jax muttered. He pulled out his phone and snapped a picture of the pill. I'm going to run this through a pill identifier app. If it comes back as anything other than what you say it is, I'm calling the cops right now. The silence that followed was deafening. Cheryl froze with the spatula in midair. Brad stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. You are disrupting this household, Brad hissed, pointing a finger at Jax. You're stressing her out. Look at her, she's shaking. I was shaking, but not from stress. I was shaking because I realized the blue pill was probably meant to knock me out so I wouldn't be able to object to whatever they had planned for later. I'm not taking it, I said, my voice sounding frail and confused, just like we planned. I don't feel good, Brad. I just want some toast. Brad exhaled, running a hand down his face. He looked at Cheryl and gave a microscopic nod. Fine, no pill, but you need to eat. Lawyer's coming at noon. Lawyer? I asked. What lawyer? Mr. Henderson, we talked about this, Mom, the power of attorney papers. Since your fall, it's become obvious you can't manage the estate alone. We need to get the paperwork signed so I can pay the bills and manage the maintenance staff. You agreed to this yesterday. I did? I blinked, feigning memory loss. Yes, you did, Cheryl said, setting a plate of pancakes in front of me. Eat up. I poked at the pancakes. I didn't trust the food, but I saw Jax give me a subtle nod. He grabbed a pancake off the stack with his bare hand and took a huge bite, chewing dramatically while staring at his father. Tastes fine, Jax mumbled with his mouth full. A little dry, Cheryl, but edible. He was testing it for me. My chest tightened. This boy, who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years because I let my son poison me against him, was risking his own safety to be my food taster. After a tense breakfast where nobody spoke, Brad announced he had to go into his home office for a conference call. Cheryl said she needed to run to the grocery store, likely to call whoever gave her those pills without Jax listening. As soon as they were gone, Jax grabbed my arm. Come on, garage, now. Why? Because Brad mentioned maintenance staff, Jax said, leading me quickly through the mudroom. You don't have maintenance staff, Grams. You have a gardener who comes on Tuesdays. Brad is lying. I want to check the rest of the house systems. We entered the garage. It was a detached 3-car structure where Frank used to keep his pride and joy, a 1969 Mustang and my daily driver, a sensible sedan. The air smelled oil and old rubber. Jax went straight to the utility closet in the corner where the furnace and water heater for the main house were connected via underground pipes. He knelt, pulling a flashlight from his belt. When did you start getting the headaches? Jax asked, shining the light behind the furnace unit. A few months ago, mostly in the mornings. And did the pilot light ever look weird, flickering yellow instead of blue? I don't come out here, Jax. The stairs are too steep. Jax was silent for a long moment. He reached back and pulled something out from the ventilation intake. It was a thick piece of insulation foam jammed deep into the pipe. Son of a... Look at this! He held up the foam. It was blackened on one side. This is the fresh air intake for the furnace, he explained, his voice shaking with rage. With this blocked, the furnace burns rich. It creates incomplete combustion. That means carbon monoxide, Grams. It's been slowly leaking into the house for months. Not enough to kill you instantly, but enough to make you dizzy, confused, tired. Enough to make you fall downstairs. I put my hand over my mouth. They've been gas chambering me? Technically, yeah. And since the CO detector in the hallway has bad batteries, I bet if I check it, the batteries are fine, just taped over. You'd never know. Jack stood up and kicked the furnace hard. This isn't just greed, Grams. This is attempted murder. Premeditated, long-game murder. I leaned against my car, feeling the world tilt. My own son. I remembered teaching him to tie his shoes. I remember paying for his college. And for months, he had been poisoning the air I breathed just to get his hands on Frank's money. "We need to leave," Jack said. "Pack a bag. We're going to a hotel." "No," I said. The word surprised me. It surprised Jax, too. "Grams, this isn't safe. The stairs, the pills, the gas. If we leave, they win," I said, straightening my back. The fog in my head was clearing, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. If I run away, Brad will use it as proof that I'm incompetent. He'll say I've been wandering, that I've been kidnapped by my estranged grandson. He has the money and the lawyer connections to spin this however he wants. He'll get the power of attorney in absentia and lock me away in a home before I can even file a police report. "So what do we do?" Jax asked. "Wait for them to finish the job?" "No." I looked at the blackened foam in his hand. "We get leverage. Real leverage. Brad is desperate, right? That means he's sloppy. He's rushing. He's bringing a lawyer over at noon to force me to sign papers." I looked him in the eye. "I'm going to sign the papers." Jack's eyes, the hour before the lawyer arrived, felt less like waiting for a meeting and more like preparing for a tactical strike. The house was quiet, that heavy, suffocating silence that comes before a storm. Brad and Cheryl were downstairs, likely rehearsing their lines of concern and love, while Jax and I were upstairs, turning my bedroom into a surveillance trap. Jax had returned from his hardware store run with a small bag of tricks. He pulled out a tiny black cube, no bigger than a sugar cube. "Spy cam," he whispered, placing it discreetly on the bookshelf, nestled between two thick volumes of encyclopedias. "High-def, audio-enabled. It streams directly to a cloud server I just set up. If they so much as sneeze wrong, we'll have it on tape." "Good," I said, smoothing the wrinkles in my dress. I had chosen a floral print, something that made me look frail, harmless, the quintessential grandmother. "But a camera won't stop them from forcing my hand, Jax. Henderson is crooked, but he's not stupid. He'll make sure the signature looks legit." "Grin," Jax grinned, reaching into his back pocket. He pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. "That's why we're going to pull the Kansas City Shuffle. Everyone looks left, you go right." He unfolded the document. It looked identical to the paperwork Brad had been waving around for weeks. The font, the letterhead, the legal jargon. But Jax tapped the paragraph in the middle of the second page. I scanned Brad's draft from the trash can in his office while they were arguing in the kitchen. He printed a test copy yesterday. I retyped it, kept all the formatting exactly the same, but here, where it lists Bradley Stone as the primary agent, I changed it. I squinted at the paper. Jackson Stone. And here, Jax pointed to the beneficiary clause regarding the immediate transfer of the estate title. I changed it to a living trust, with me as the trustee, effective immediately upon signature. "You want me to switch the papers?" I asked, my heart thumping, "right under their noses?" "No, you can't do it. You're the confused old lady, remember?" Jax winked. "I'll do it. I just need a distraction, a big one. Can you handle that?" "Honey," I said, a cold smile touching my lips, "I raised your father. I know how to push his buttons." At exactly noon, the doorbell rang. It sounded like a death knell. I made my way downstairs, leaning heavily on the banister, Jax trailing a few steps behind me like a silent bodyguard. In the living room, Brad was already pouring drinks. Standing next to him was Mr. Henderson. Henderson was exactly what I expected, a man who looked like he sweated grease. He wore a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too wide. He smelled of cheap cologne and desperation. "Margaret, so good to see you," Henderson boomed, extending a hand that felt like a damp fish. "You're looking resting. Brad told me about your little tumble. Dreadful business." "I'm getting by," I said, making my voice quaver. I allowed myself to sink into the sofa, letting my head loll slightly to the side. Just tired, so tired. "We won't take long, Mom," Brad said, sitting on the edge of the coffee table, invading my personal space. "Mr. Henderson just needs to witness your signature on the updated management forms. It's just to help pay the bills, remember?" "The bills," I echoed vacantly. "Yes, the heating bill is so high." "Exactly," Cheryl chimed in from the armchair, clutching her purse as if she were ready to bolt. "We just want to take that burden off your shoulders." Henderson opened his briefcase and pulled out a crisp, stapled stack of documents. He placed them on the table in front of me, along with a heavy, expensive-looking pen. "Standard durable power of attorney," Henderson said, tapping the paper. "It gives Bradley here the ability to handle your accounts, sign checks, and manage the property deeds. It's for your own protection, Margaret." Jack stepped forward, crossing his arms. "Mind if I read that first?" Brad's head snapped up. "This doesn't concern you, Jackson. This is between Mom and her legal counsel." "She's my grandmother," Jack said, calm but edging on threatening, "and she's medicated. If she signs something she doesn't understand, that's coercion." "She understands perfectly well," Brad snapped, his facade slipping. "Don't you, Mom?" I looked at Brad, then at the papers. The camera on the bookshelf was perfectly positioned to catch this entire interaction. I think so. Is this for the bank?" "Yes, for the bank," Brad said through gritted teeth. "Just sign it, Mom." Jax moved as if to pick up the papers. Brad shot out a hand to stop him, shoving Jax back. "Don't touch them," Brad yelled. It was the opening we needed. "Stop it!" I cried out, flailing my arm as if in panic. My hand struck the coffee pot on the tray in front of me. It was a beautiful disaster. The pot tipped, sending hot black coffee cascading across the table, splashing onto Henderson's cheap suit and soaking the bottom half of the documents. "My suit, are you kidding me?" Henderson shrieked, jumping up and frantically brushing at his pants. "Oh God, Mom," Brad groaned, grabbing a handful of napkins and throwing them onto the mess. Cheryl ran to the kitchen. Henderson was busy cursing and wiping his leg. Brad was focused on dabbing the coffee off the mahogany table. In that split second of chaos, nobody was looking at the paperwork. Jax moved with the speed of a sleight-of-hand magician. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his folded drive version of the document, and in one fluid motion, swapped it with the coffee-stained stack on the table. He shoved the wet papers into his jacket pocket and stepped back, looking innocent. Cheryl came running back with a roll of paper towels. The commotion settled down, leaving a heavy, awkward tension in the air. "I'm so sorry," I whimpered, pulling a tissue from my sleeve. "I'm so clumsy. I just wanted it to stop." "It's fine," Brad snapped, though he looked like he wanted to strangle me. He looked at the papers on the table. They were the dry set Jax had placed there. Brad didn't even blink. He just assumed the coffee had missed them, or he was too stressed to notice. He flipped to the last page, the signature page. "The papers are fine," Brad said, exhaling. "Just sign it, Mom. Please, let's end this." Henderson sat back down, still dabbing at his wet thigh. "Yes, please. Mrs. Stone, sign on the line marked Grantor." I looked at the paper. I looked at Jax. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. This was it, the moment I legally handed over control. If Jack's swap had not worked, or if he had made a typo, I was signing my death warrant. But I looked at Brad's face. He was staring at the pen with a hunger that made me sick. He didn't care about me. He cared about the ink. I pressed the pen to the paper. "I'm doing this for the family," I whispered. "We know, Mom," Brad said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. I signed, Margaret Elizabeth Stone. Brad let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. He snatched the papers away the second I lifted the pen. "Witness here," Brad commanded Henderson. Henderson scribbled his signature and stamped it with his notary seal. "Done. Congratulations, Brad. You're officially in the driver's seat." "Thank you, Arthur," Brad said, a smug grin spreading across his face. "Well, Mom, you should rest. We'll handle everything from here. You won't have to worry about a single bill ever again." "I'm going to take a nap," I said, letting Jax help me stand. "I feel heavy." "You do that," Cheryl said, already pulling out her phone, probably to browse vacation homes in Cabo. "We'll order dinner later." Jax led me up the stairs. We didn't speak until we were safely inside the guest room with the door locked and the chair wedged back under the handle. Jax pulled the coffee-stained original documents out of his jacket and tossed them into the trash can. Then he flopped onto the sofa and let out a long, shaky laugh. "They didn't even read it," Jax whispered. "They were so greedy, they didn't even read the first page." "So, it's done?" I asked, sitting on the bed, my adrenaline crashing. "It's done," Jax said. "Legally, as of 5 minutes ago, I am the trustee of the Stone estate. Brad has a piece of paper that says he has power of attorney, but that power applies to assets you own. And guess what? You don't own the house anymore. The trust does, and I control the trust." "He's going to find out," I said, "when he goes to the bank, when he tries to list the house." "He'll find out Monday. Banks are closed for the weekend. That gives us 48 hours. 48 hours for what?" Jax looked at me, his expression darkening. "They think they won, Grams. They think you're powerless and that they have legal cover. That means they're going to stop being careful. They're going to celebrate. And when people celebrate, they talk." He pointed to the spy cam on the shelf. "We have the document switch for safety, but that just saves the money. It doesn't put them in jail. For that, we need a confession. Tonight, they're going to drink champagne and toast to their victory, and we're going to be listening to every word." I nodded, staring at the wall. My son had just tried to strip me of everything I owned. He thought he had buried me, but I forgot that seeds also grow in the dark. The ceiling of my bedroom was stamped with a floral pattern I'd stared at for 40 years. But tonight, it felt like the lid of a coffin. Downstairs, the muffled bass of a stereo thumped. My stereo. The vintage Bose system Frank had bought in the 90s. They were playing classic rock, loud. A celebration. Jax was sitting on the floor with his back against the bed frame, a tablet balanced on his knees. He had wired a headphone splitter so we could both listen to the live feed from the living room without making a sound. The spy camera's audio was crystal clear, picking up the clink of crystal glasses and the sickening sound of my son's laughter. "Turn it up a little," I whispered, leaning over the edge of the mattress. "I want to hear every word." Jax tapped the screen. On the grainy night vision display, Brad was loosening his tie, his face flushed with expensive scotch. Cheryl was kicked back in my recliner, my chair, with her feet up on the ottoman, swirling a glass of wine. "To the path of least resistance," Brad toasted, raising his glass to the ceiling, "and to the old bat finally signing on the dotted line." "God, I thought she'd never do it," Cheryl groaned, taking a long sip. "She was being so difficult with the tea this morning. I thought for a second she knew about the extra seasoning in her cup." I felt Jack stiffen beside me. He looked up, his eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, my stomach churning. "Keep recording." "She's resilient, I'll give her that," Brad chuckled, pacing the room. "Most people would have been bedridden after that tumble down the stairs. I spent 20 minutes loosening those carpet tacks. I figured a broken hip would be a slam dunk for a competency hearing. But no, she bounces back like a rubber ball." "Well, it doesn't matter now," Cheryl said, waving her hand dismissively. "We have the power of attorney. We control the accounts. We can drain the liquid assets by Tuesday and list the house by Friday. What are you going to do with her?" Brad stopped pacing. He looked toward the stairs, and even through the screen, his expression made my blood run cold. "We stick to the plan. We keep her sedated. The gas leak in the furnace is slow, babe. It's elegant. It mimics natural decline. Confusion, lethargy, heart failure. Now that we have the signature, we don't need to rush, but we don't need to drag it out either. I'll crank the thermostat up tonight. The more the heat runs, the more CO pumps into the vents. She'll just go to sleep. Jax ripped the headphones off, his face pale with rage. I'm going down there. I'm going to kill him. He started to stand, his fists clenched so hard his knuckles were white. I reached out and grabbed his wrist. My grip was surprisingly strong. No, I hissed. Sit down.
The roar of the 1969 Mustang's engine was the only sound in the world. Jax was driving like a bat out of hell, putting miles between us and the toxic waste dump I used to call home. I sat in the passenger seat, gripping the door handle, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of neon. My heart was still racing, banging against my ribs like a trapped bird. But for the first time in months, my head was clear. The carbon monoxide wasn't clouding my brain anymore. The cold night air rushing through the vents felt like a baptism. "We need a place to crash," Jax shouted over the engine rumble. "Not a chain hotel. Too many cameras. Brad might have friends looking for plates." "Head towards the interstate," I directed, my voice surprising me with its steadiness. "There's the Starlight Motel off exit 42. It's a dive, but they take cash and don't ask questions." Jax glanced at me, a grin tugging at his beard. "You know where the dive motels are? Grams, you got a secret life I don't know about?" "I know where your grandfather used to play poker when he didn't want me to know about it. Keep your eyes on the road." We pulled into the Starlight 20 minutes later. It lived up to its reputation. Flickering neon sign, peeling paint, and a front desk clerk who looked like he'd seen everything from drug deals to alien abductions. Jax paid for 2 nights in cash, and we hauled our go bag, containing the laptop, the hard drive, and the evidence, into room 12. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner, but to me, it smelled like safety. I sat on the lumpy bed while Jax set up the laptop on the wobbly desk. He connected to the hotel Wi-Fi through a VPN. He called it masking our digital footprint, and pulled up the feed from the spy camera back at the manor. "Ready to see what the rats are doing?" Jax asked. I took a deep breath. "Turn it on." On the screen, the living room of the manor was bathed in the harsh light of the overhead chandelier. The power was back on. Brad was storming around the room, still holding a flashlight like a weapon. Cheryl was sitting on the sofa, looking less like a victorious queen and more like a scared little girl. "She's not in the bedroom," Brad yelled, kicking the ottoman. "The bed is empty. The window is open." "Maybe she jumped," Cheryl suggested, her voice trembling. "Jumped? She's 72, Cheryl. She didn't jump off the second-story roof. Someone took her. Or she climbed down." Brad ran a hand through his hair, pacing frantically. "The car. Check the garage." We watched as Brad ran out of the frame. A minute later, he stormed back in, his face purple with rage. "The Mustang is gone, and the sedan. Jax. It has to be Jax." "I thought you said Jax was broke and stupid," Cheryl snapped. "He must have circled back," Brad hissed. "He kidnapped her. That's it. He kidnapped her to get leverage on the estate." I snorted. "Kidnapped? I'm the getaway driver." "Watch this," Jax said, pointing at the screen. "He's shifting the narrative. He's building his defense." Brad pulled out his phone. He took a deep breath, composed his face in the mirror above the fireplace, smoothing his hair, practicing a look of distraught concern, and dialed 911. "Yes, police? Please, I need help." Brad's voice on the recording transformed instantly into a panic-stricken son. "It's my mother, Margaret Stone. She's suffering from dementia. She's gone. I think she wandered off, or... No, I think my estranged son might have taken her. He was here earlier. He was aggressive. Please, hurry." He hung up and looked at Cheryl. "Go cry in the kitchen. Make it look real." I felt a wave of nausea hit me. "He's good," I whispered. "He's really, really good at lying." "Not good enough," Jack said, tapping the hard drive. "We have the prequel to this little performance." We spent the rest of the night taking turns sleeping. I couldn't really rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brad adjusting the thermostat, sentencing me to a slow death. The betrayal was a physical ache, heavier than the bruising on my hip. Saturday morning broke gray and rainy. We stayed holed up in the room, subsisting on vending machine coffee and stale crackers. We spent the day glued to the laptop. The police had arrived at the manor around 2 a.m. We watched the body cam footage, or rather, we watched Brad perform for the officers in our living room. He showed them the broken lock on the window, which he broke himself after the call. He showed them my medication, the fake pills, and he cried. Actual tears. "She's been so confused lately," he sobbed to a young female officer. She didn't know who I was half the time, and Jackson, he's been demanding money. I cut him off and he threatened to take her. I should have never let him in the house. The officer took notes, looking sympathetic. We've put out an APB for the Mustang, Mr. Stone, and we're pinging Jackson's phone. Jax, I said, looking at him. Your phone. Way ahead of you, Grams. Jack said with a hypey night changler. My real phone is in a dumpster behind a 7-Eleven in Jersey. Let them ping the raccoons. By Saturday afternoon, the police had left the manor. Brad and Cheryl were alone in the house. You'd think they'd be worried about a missing person investigation, but the moment the cops were gone, the grieving act dropped like a hot rock. This complicates things, Brad said, pouring himself a drink at 2 p.m. If the cops find her with Jax, they'll bring her back. But if she talks... Who are they going to believe, Cheryl asked, scrolling on her iPad. The successful lawyer and his wife, or the sentinel old lady and the mechanic with the record for street racing? We have the doctor's notes about her confusion. We have the neighbors who saw the ambulance. We control the narrative. True, Brad mused. We just need to move fast on the assets. I can't list the house until she's declared incompetent or absent, but I can access the accounts on Monday. I have the POA. We should transfer the savings first. The Cayman account is set up? Yeah, Monday morning, 9 a.m., I'll go to the bank, present the POA, and wire the funds. By the time Jax tries to make a claim, the money will be offshore. I looked at Jax. He was grinning. He's going to the bank at 9 a.m., Jax said. That's our appointment. He thinks he has the power, I said, feeling a cold determination harden inside me. And instead, Jack said, he's going to walk into a buzzsaw. Sunday was the hardest day. The waiting. We had to sit in that motel room while Brad and Cheryl lived in my house, ate my food, and planned their tropical vacation with my money. We watched them bring in a contractor to give an estimate on renovations for the sale. We watched Cheryl start packing up my jewelry into boxes. That's my mother's necklace, I said, watching the feed as Cheryl tossed a vintage pearl string into a cardboard box like it was costume jewelry. She's not keeping it, Jax promised. She's not keeping a damn thing. We spent Sunday night prepping. Jax printed out documents on the motel's ancient printer. We organized the audio files on a USB drive. We rehearsed our timeline. Monday morning, Jax said, pacing the small room. Here's the play. Brad is going to First National Bank at 9. We need to be there at 8:59. We need to meet with the branch manager before Brad walks in. Mr. Higgins, I nodded. I've known him for 20 years. He's a good man. He won't like being used for fraud. We show Higgins the POA swap. We show him the trust documents. We show him the video of Brad admitting to the gas leak. Jack stopped pacing and looked at me. Grams, once we do this, there's no going back. Brad goes to prison. Cheryl too, probably. The family name gets dragged through the mud. Are you sure you're ready for that? I looked at the screen one last time. Brad was asleep in his recliner, a glass of scotch balanced on his chest, looking peaceful. He looked like the little boy I used to tuck in, but that boy was dead. The man in the chair was a stranger who looked me in the eye and tried to erase my existence for a payout. He didn't hesitate when he turned up that thermostat, Jax, I said quietly. He didn't hesitate when he drugged me. He made his choice. Now he gets to live with the consequences. Okay, Jack said. Then get some sleep. We have a show to put on. I lay back on the pillow, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just ready. The predator thinks he's the only one with teeth. He forgets that the matriarch of the pack is the one who taught him how to hunt. Brad wanted a war? He was about to find out that I brought the artillery. Jax, I whispered into the dark. Yeah, Grams, make sure the Mustang is gassed up. We need to make an entrance. Don't worry, Jax laughed softly. They'll hear us coming.
Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp blue sky that usually signals a fresh start. But today, it signaled the end of my son's life as he knew it. The 1969 Mustang rumbled into the parking lot of First National Bank at 8:50 a.m. sharp. Jax cut the engine, and the silence that followed was heavy. You ready for this, Grams? Jax asked, gripping the steering wheel. He was wearing a clean button-down shirt he'd bought at a thrift store yesterday, trying to look the part of a trustee. I've been ready since he tried to gas me like a bug, I said, checking my lipstick in the vanity mirror. Let's go catch a rat. We walked into the bank 10 minutes before it opened to the public. Mr. Higgins, the branch manager, unlocked the door for us himself. I had called him on his personal cell yesterday. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. "Margaret," Higgins breathed, ushering us into his glass-walled office and closing the blinds. "When you said it was urgent, I didn't expect this. The police report says you're missing, endangered." "I am endangered, Arthur," I said, taking the seat opposite his desk. "Endangered by the man who is walking through your front doors in 10 minutes. Jax wasted no time. He slapped a folder onto the mahogany desk. "Mr. Higgins, this is the irrevocable living trust established by Margaret Stone on Friday afternoon. It transfers all assets, including the estate and the liquid savings, into a trust managed by me. It supersedes any power of attorney documents signed prior or concurrent." Higgins put on his spectacles and scanned the documents. This looks in order. The notary seal is valid. But Brad called me. He said he has a POA signed Friday as well. He wants to execute a wire transfer to the Caymans." "He does have a POA," I said calmly, "but he thinks he's transferring my money. He doesn't know that as of Friday, I don't own that money. The trust does, and he has no authority over the trust." "But that's not the worst part," Jack said. He pulled out the USB drive. "The reason we're here isn't just to stop a transfer, it's to stop a murder." We played the audio clip for Higgins. The quality was perfect. Brad's voice filled the small office. 80 degrees. That should keep the furnace rowing all night. She's just taking up space." Higgins turned a shade of pale, usually reserved for corpses. He looked at me, horror in his eyes. He rigged the furnace," I confirmed. "He tried to kill me for the inheritance, Arthur. And he's coming here now to cash out before the body is found." Higgins set his jaw. He reached for his desk phone. "I'm calling the police." "We already did," Jack said. "Sheriff Miller is parked around back. He's waiting for the signal. We need Brad to attempt the transaction. We need him to commit fraud on record. Can you hold it together?" Higgins straightened his tie, a look of grim determination settling on his face. "For you, Margaret, I'll give the performance of a lifetime." At 9 a.m. on the dot, the front doors opened. Through the slats of the blinds, I watched my son walk in. He looked impeccable in his navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He walked with the swagger of a man who thought he had gotten away with the perfect crime. He didn't look like a grieving son. He looked like a CEO closing a merger. He bypassed the teller line and walked straight to Higgins' office. "Game time," Jax whispered. We moved to the corner of the room, behind a large filing cabinet that shielded us from the immediate view of the doorway. "Knock, knock." "Come in, Brad," Higgins called out, his voice steady. Brad pushed the door open and strode in, extending a hand. "Arthur, good to see you. Sorry to barge in, but as I mentioned on the phone, time is of the essence. With Mom missing, well, we need to secure the assets before anything unpredictable happens." "Of course," Higgins said, not taking the hand. "Please, sit." "It's a terrible tragedy. Do the police have any leads?" "They think she wandered off," Brad said, feigning a sigh as he sat down, "or that my delinquent son Jackson took her. That's actually why I'm here. If Jackson has her, he'll try to access her accounts. I need to move the funds to a secure holding account offshore, immediately." "I see," Higgins said, typing on his keyboard. "And you have the power of attorney." "Right here." Brad slid the papers across the desk. The same papers I had signed with shaking hands just 48 hours ago. "It grants me full control over all finances." Higgins picked up the paper. "Brad, this document, there's a problem." "What problem?" Brad's voice sharpened instantly. "It's notarized. It's legal." "It is legal," slowly said, "but it's useless." "Useless? What the hell are you talking about? I'm her son. I'm her agent. Transfer the money, Arthur, now. Or I'll have your job." "You can't transfer what doesn't exist, Dad," Jack said, stepping out from behind the filing cabinet. Brad spun around in his chair so fast I thought he'd get whiplash. His eyes bulged out of his head. "Jax, what are you doing here?" "And you can't kill what's already made of steel," I added, stepping out beside my grandson. Brad's face went white. Whatever color was left drained away instantly. He looked from me to Jax, then back to Higgins, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. Mom? You're alive? I finished for him. Lucid? Not dead from carbon monoxide poisoning? Brad scrambled backward, his chair hitting the desk. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm so glad you're safe. We were so worried. Cut the crap, Brad, Jack snapped. We have the house bugged. We have cameras. We have you on tape turning up the thermostat. We have you talking to Cheryl about the slow leak. We have it all. That's illegal surveillance, Brad shouted, pointing a shaking finger at us. Inadmissible. You can't use that. Actually, Sheriff Miller said, opening the office door and stepping in, 2 deputies behind him, in a single-party consent state, and considering the homeowner, Margaret, authorized the recording, it's perfectly admissible, especially when it captures the commission of a felony. Brad looked at the sheriff, then at the handcuffs on the deputy's belt. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by the terrified look of a cornered animal. It was Cheryl. It was her idea. She made me do it. She said we needed the money. My heart broke a final time, not for the loss of my son, but for the pathetic reality of who he was. He wasn't just a murderer. He was a coward who would throw his own wife under the bus to save his own skin. Cheryl is being picked up at the house right now, Sheriff Miller said, pulling Brad out of his chair. The metal clicked, a cold, final sound. Mom, please, Brad pleaded as they dragged him toward the door. The lobby was full of customers now, all watching in stunned silence as the prominent local lawyer was hauled away in cuffs. Mom! I called after him. Don't call me Mom. Call your lawyer. When the doors closed behind him, the silence in the office was deafening. Higgins exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding for 10 minutes. I'm so sorry, Margaret, he said softly. Don't be. I just lost 180 pounds of dead weight. I feel lighter already. Jax put his arm around my shoulder. You okay, Grams? I'm fine, I said, patting his hand. Let's go home, Jax. We have a lot of remodeling to do. I want to burn that recliner. 3 months later, the smell of fresh paint filled the manor. The heavy, dark drapes were gone, replaced with light, airy linen. The house didn't smell like lemon and secrets anymore. It smelled like sawdust and coffee. Jax was in the driveway working on the Mustang. He had officially moved into the guest house, but he spent most of his time in the main house, fixing the 40 years of deferred maintenance Brad had ignored. I sat on the porch sipping tea. Actual tea, not the poisoned sludge Cheryl used to make. The legal battle was effectively over. With the video evidence and the confessions, Brad and Cheryl had taken plea deals. They were looking at 20 years each. Attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse, the list was long. I picked up my iPad and opened the YouTube app. Our channel, Never Too Old, had just hit 100,000 subscribers. The comments on our latest video, How to Spot Financial Abuse, were flooding in. Go get him, Grandma! Team Maggie forever! Your grandson is a hero. I smiled. They called it a tragedy in the papers, a family torn apart by greed. But sitting here, watching Jax laugh as he wiped grease on his forehead, I didn't feel torn apart. Brad thought I was a relic. He thought I was a crumbling foundation he could bulldoze over to get to the treasure underneath. He forgot that the foundation is the strongest part of the house. He forgot that you don't mess with the woman who has survived 7 decades of life, raised children, buried a husband, and lived to tell the tale. I took a sip of tea and watched the sun set over the property that was finally, truly safe. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Maybe that's true, but you definitely shouldn't try to kick one, because this old dog still has teeth, and I'm not afraid to bite. Hey, Grams, yelled out from the driveway. You want to learn how to change a spark plug? I set my cup down and stood up, feeling stronger than I had in years. I'm coming, I shouted back, but if I break a nail, you're buying me dinner. I walked down the steps, leaving the empty house behind me. The nightmare was over. The best years were just beginning, and if anyone else decided to mess with Maggie Stone, well, let him come. I'll be waiting.